This pot is ready to harvest today, but the real secret is growing in the 3 pots behind it. The first is full and ready for the kitchen. The second is almost there. The third is still building leaves. The fourth has only just begun. Together, these 4 ordinary containers can create a steadier supply of fresh food than a much larger group of pots planted on the same day. Most gardeners think a bigger harvest begins by planting more. So they fill every container at once, sow every row at once, and use the entire packet of seed because the empty soil looks unfinished. At first, the garden feels exciting. Every pot is full of possibility. Then the seedlings rise together, need thinning together, demand water together, and reach harvest together. For a brief moment, there is more lettuce, spinach, or radish than the household can comfortably use. A week later, the mature crop is gone, the containers are empty, and the next harvest has not even started. That feast and famine pattern is not usually caused by a lack of space. It is caused by a lack of timing. The containers may be productive, but they are productive at the same moment. This video is about changing that pattern with one simple rhythm. Begin 1 new pot at a time. You may hear this method called succession planting. The name sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Instead of asking every plant to finish together, you start small batches at different times. One batch is being harvested while another is growing behind it. When the first batch ends, the next one is already moving into place. The phrase 1 pot every week makes the system easy to remember, but it is not a biological rule that every crop must obey. Some plants may fit a 7-day rhythm, others may need 2 or 3 weeks between sowings. Some can remain in the same pot for repeated harvests. Others leave the container the moment you pull the roots. Weather can speed the system up, slow it down, or pause it completely. The goal is not to serve the calendar. The goal is to use the calendar as a starting point. Then let the plants and your kitchen tell you what to do next. You also do not need to grow all 15 crops in this video. Think of them as a menu. Begin with 3 to 5 crops your household already eats. A small rotation that matches real meals is more useful than a large rotation filled with vegetables nobody is excited to use. Before we choose the first crop, look again at the 4 containers. The youngest pot may seem least important because it has nothing to harvest. In reality, it protects the future. Without that youngest pot, the harvest in front is only a temporary success. With it, today's meal becomes part of a continuing system. So the first question is not, how much can I plant today? The better question is, what should I start now so something useful is ready after this harvest ends? Planting everything at once often feels efficient because the work is concentrated into one afternoon. You mix the soil once, open the seed packets once, water everything once, and step back from a completely planted garden. But the convenience at the beginning can create pressure later. Imagine 4 identical pots of leaf lettuce planted on the same day. They germinate close together. They need thinning at nearly the same time. As the leaves expand, every container begins using more water. Then all 4 reach a good harvest stage within a similar window. If you enjoy a large salad every day or you are feeding a big family, that may be exactly what you want. Planting together is not automatically wrong. It is useful when you want one concentrated harvest for a gathering, preservation, sharing, or a planned series of meals. But for many small households, 4 mature pots are more than they can use before quality begins to change. Outer leaves become oversized. Plants crowd one another. Tender greens become tougher or stronger in flavor. Warm weather may push the oldest plants toward flowering. The gardener sees abundance, but also feels rushed. Now, place the same 4 pots in a succession. Pot 1 starts first, pot 2 begins later. Pot 3 follows after that. Pot 4 is the youngest. The total number of containers has not changed. The difference is that each container is performing a different job. One pot is supplying food. One is approaching harvest. One is building the size it needs. One is protecting the next stage of the cycle. The work is also divided. You are not thinning every pot in the same week or harvesting everything on the same afternoon. The garden becomes easier to read because each container has a clear role. This approach can also reduce waste. When you grow smaller batches, you learn how much your household truly uses. Perhaps one 8 or 10-inch pot of arugula is enough, because its peppery flavor is used in small amounts. Perhaps lettuce disappears quickly and deserves 2 containers in the rotation. Perhaps parsley lasts so long that one established pot is enough for many weeks. The system teaches you through actual use. There is another benefit that is easy to overlook. Smaller, staggered plantings spread risk. If one sowing struggles because of a sudden hot spell, overwatering, poor germination, or pest damage, every future harvest has not failed at once. A younger or older pot may still continue. Succession planting does not guarantee success, but it prevents every crop from depending on one planting date. The contrast becomes clear when both systems are placed side by side. 4 pots planted together look more impressive during one short peak. 4 pots planted in stages look less dramatic on any single day, but they can be more useful over time. That is the trade. We are not chasing the biggest possible harvest photograph. We are building a rhythm that fits ordinary cooking. 1 bowl of greens today, another small harvest later, a few roots when they are ready, and herbs close enough to cut while dinner is being prepared. The solution begins by turning one large planting day into a series of smaller decisions. Those decisions are easier when the containers, labels, and positions are organized from the beginning. Start with containers that fit the crops you plan to grow and that have reliable drainage. They do not need to be expensive or identical, but similar containers make the rotation easier to understand. When the pots have roughly the same width and volume, you can compare how different crops respond without constantly wondering whether one plant is growing faster simply because it has twice as much soil. Use a light container mix that drains well while still holding enough moisture for roots. Heavy garden soil can compact in a pot, especially after repeated watering. A dense mix may stay wet in the center while appearing dry on the surface. It can also reduce the air available around roots. The goal is a mixture that supports the plant without becoming a hard block after several weeks. Every container needs a label. Write the crop name and the planting date. You can also add a simple week number if that helps you see the sequence. A label that says leaf lettuce. Week 1 is more useful than relying on memory after several pots begin to look alike. This small habit becomes essential once the rotation expands. Young bok choy, tatsoi, mustard greens, and some kale seedlings can look similar at first. Cilantro and parsley may be easy to confuse when they are tiny. A missing label seems harmless on planting day, but later it can make the schedule difficult to understand. Now, give the rotation 4 simple stages. Stage 1 is the newly planted pot. Stage 2 is the young crop. Stage 3 is the developing crop. Stage 4 is the harvest pot. These stages are not exact measurements. They are visual roles. The newly planted pot needs gentle moisture and close attention while seeds germinate. The young pot needs thinning, steady light, and protection from competition. The developing pot is building the leaves or roots that will eventually be harvested. The harvest pot is supplying the kitchen. When the harvest pot finishes, the other containers move forward in the sequence. The developing pot becomes the next harvest candidate. The young pot becomes the developing crop. The newest seedlings become the young crop. The empty pot is cleaned, refreshed, replanted, and returned to the beginning. You do not have to physically move every container if that is inconvenient. A heavy pot can stay in place. The rotation can exist on paper or through labels. But physically arranging pots from oldest to youngest is helpful for beginners because the system can be understood at a glance. Before starting a new pot, ask 3 questions. How much of the current harvest is still unused? How close is the next container to being ready? Is the weather likely to support the new sowing? These 3 questions prevent the calendar from becoming wasteful. If the current pot is still full and the next pot is almost mature, sowing another large batch may create excess. If the current crop is nearly gone and the next pot is still small, you may need to start sooner next time or add another container. If the weather is moving against a cool season crop, Waiting may be wiser than following a date written weeks earlier. This is why the system begins with observation, not with a rigid chart. The chart gives structure. The plants provide the correction. With the 4 stages in place, we can begin with 2 crops that make the rhythm easy to see: leaf lettuce and spinach. Leaf lettuce is one of the easiest crops for understanding succession planting because it can be harvested in more than one way. You can cut selected outer leaves and leave the center growing, or you can harvest a larger portion when the plant reaches the size you prefer. For a rolling supply, small batches are usually more practical than a container crowded with dozens of plants. Sow enough seed to create the amount of lettuce your household is likely to use, not enough to hide every inch of soil. A pot that looks modest during the first week can become surprisingly full once the leaves expand. As seedlings appear, thin them so each plant has room to form healthy leaves. Overcrowding may create an impressive green surface, but it also increases competition for light, water, and nutrients. Crowded leaves can remain damp longer, and the plants may stretch instead of building a balanced shape. When the lettuce is ready, harvesting the outer leaves can keep the pot useful for a longer period. That means the next lettuce container may not need to start every single week. Watch the center growth and the amount you are actually cutting. If one pot continues producing enough for your meals, the correct decision may be to delay the next sowing. On the other hand, if your household uses lettuce quickly, a closer succession can prevent gaps. The key is not the number 7 on the calendar. The key is the relationship between the current pot and the next one. Leaf lettuce also teaches the first major seasonal lesson. A rhythm that works during mild weather may change as temperatures rise. Plants can move through their useful harvest window faster. Leaves may lose tenderness, and older plants may begin stretching upward. When that happens, planting more frequently is not always the answer. Sometimes, the better response is to use smaller batches, harvest younger, provide suitable protection from harsh afternoon conditions, or pause until the season becomes more favorable. Spinach fits the same system, but it should not be treated as lettuce with a different leaf shape. It can perform very well when conditions suit it, yet its useful window may change quickly as the weather warms. A small pot of spinach can be harvested for tender leaves, or the plants can be allowed to grow larger. Those 2 goals require different spacing and different timing. If you want baby leaves, you may sow more densely and cut sooner. If you want larger plants, give them more room and allow the pot to remain in the rotation longer. Watch how the spinach responds, rather than assuming it will match the lettuce pot beside it. 2 containers planted on the same day can reach very different stages. One may be ready while the other is still building. That is not a problem. It is information. If spinach begins finishing faster than expected, do not automatically start even more spinach. First, ask whether the season is shortening its quality window. A new sowing may face the same conditions. A temporary pause can protect seed, time, and container space. This is the first important correction to the 1 pot a week idea. The rhythm is valuable because it makes you look ahead, but the plants decide whether the rhythm should continue. Lettuce and spinach can make the system feel simple. The next 3 crops reveal why flavor, harvest style, and household habits matter just as much as growth speed. Arugula can grow into a generous container, but its strong, peppery flavor means many households use less of it than they use lettuce. That makes it an ideal example of why pot size and planting quantity should match the kitchen. If you enjoy a handful of arugula in a salad, sandwich, or pasta, you may not need a large container entering the rotation every week. A smaller sowing can provide enough without forcing you to harvest more than you want. Cut the leaves while they are at the stage and flavor you prefer. Then watch how quickly the pot recovers. When a crop has a strong flavor, a little can go a long way. The rotation should reflect that. If the current pot still has plenty of usable leaves when the next pot is approaching harvest, increase the interval or reduce the number of plants. A system that responds to taste is more efficient than one that responds only to seed packet dates. Baby kale behaves differently. When harvested carefully, a healthy plant can remain productive for an extended period. Remove selected outer leaves and leave the growing center intact. Because the pot continues supplying food, It may not need to leave the rotation as quickly as a pot of radishes or a head of bok choy harvested all at once. This creates a useful distinction. Some containers move through the 4 stages and then reset. Others become long-term producers that sit partly outside the rapid rotation. Baby kale may function as one of these anchor pots. An anchor pot reduces the pressure on the succession schedule. While new lettuce or radish containers enter and leave, the kale continues contributing leaves. The same idea can apply to certain herbs and green onions. Not every container must move at the same speed, but a long-producing pot still needs observation. Remove damaged or aging leaves. Keep the plant from becoming overcrowded. Watch moisture, especially as the canopy grows and the roots fill more of the mix. A container that produced comfortably when young may dry faster as the plant matures. Mustard greens bring another variation. They can be harvested young for a milder texture and flavor, or allowed to grow larger for a stronger presence in cooked dishes. The stage you prefer determines how quickly the pot should move. If your household likes small, tender leaves, frequent small sowings may work well during suitable weather. If the greens are used mainly for cooking, a slightly larger but less frequent planting may make more sense. Again, the crop is not deciding the schedule alone. The recipe is part of the schedule. Mustard greens also show why waiting too long can reduce usefulness. A pot may still look productive, yet the leaves may be larger or stronger than you want. Harvest quality is not measured only by size. The best moment is when the crop matches the way you plan to eat it. At this point, 3 containers can all be called leafy greens, but require different strategies. Arugula may need a smaller batch because of flavor. Baby kale may remain as a long-term producer. Mustard greens may be harvested at different stages depending on how they are used. This is what makes succession planting more than repeating the same action every Saturday. You are building a living schedule based on growth, flavor, harvest style, and demand. The next group makes that decision even more visible. With bok choy, tatsoi, and Mizuna, the choice between taking a few leaves and removing the whole plant can completely change what happens to the container next. Bok choy is naturally suited to small space cooking because a compact plant can become one useful portion for a stir-fry, soup, or side dish. But before you plant it, decide how you want to harvest it. If your goal is a whole compact plant, the container will move toward one clear finishing point. Once the bok choy is removed, that space leaves the production stage and enters the reset stage. The next pot should already be developing behind it. If you prefer to remove a few outer leaves, the plant can remain productive longer. That slows the need for replacement. Both methods are valid, but they create different rhythms. The mistake is planting every bok choy pot at the same interval, without deciding which harvest method you will use. Spacing matters here. A container filled too tightly may produce many small plants, but crowding can limit airflow and make watering less predictable. Give the plants enough room for the size you intend to harvest. A pot designed for baby bok choy can hold a different number than a pot intended for larger plants. Tatsoi forms a low rosette that can fit beautifully into a container. Its shape makes the growing stage easy to read from above. You can harvest small leaves or allow the rosette to become fuller. If you want tender leaves for salads, the pot may move quickly. If you want a larger rosette for cooking, it stays longer. The label should record the planting date, but your eyes should determine the harvest stage. Tatsoi also shows why one pot can be divided into smaller harvest zones. Instead of removing everything on one day, you may harvest selected plants first and leave others to continue. This can stretch the usefulness of the container, provided the remaining plants have enough space and are not damaged during harvest. Mizuna offers another flexible option. Its narrow leaves can be harvested in small amounts and mixed with milder greens. This makes Mizuna useful for adding variety, without requiring a large quantity. A small Mizuna pot can support several meals if you cut carefully and allow regrowth. That means it may behave more like baby kale than like a whole head crop. It can become a semi-permanent contributor while faster containers move around it. These Asian greens give the rotation depth. Lettuce may supply a soft base. Arugula adds a sharper note. Mizuna contributes texture. Bok choy and tatsoi can move from salad to cooked dishes. Instead of filling the garden with identical pots, you can stagger different crops that serve different meals. Variety also protects the kitchen from boredom. A continuous harvest is only valuable when people enjoy eating it. If every container produces the same leaf week after week, enthusiasm can disappear even when the plants are healthy. Rotating flavors can be as important as rotating dates. Now look at the container after a partial harvest. If the center is still healthy and growing, it remains in the production stage. If most plants have been removed, the pot may be better reset than left half empty for weeks. A half-used container is not automatically efficient. It still consumes space and attention. Ask whether the remaining plants are likely to produce a meaningful harvest. If yes, keep them. If not, finish the harvest, refresh the pot, and begin again. That decision becomes even clearer with root crops. Radishes, baby beets, and turnips change the system because the harvest develops beneath the surface and usually removes the entire plant. Radishes are among the easiest root crops to imagine in succession because a small group can be sown, harvested, and replaced. But they also expose the cost of overcrowding. When too many seeds are left close together, the leaves may look abundant, while the roots below have limited room. Thin the seedlings, so the developing roots are not forced into constant competition. The correct spacing depends on the variety and the size you want, but the principle is simple. A root crop needs space below as well as light above. A modest pot of radishes can be more useful than a container packed for appearance. Sow a quantity you can eat while the roots are at the stage you prefer. Once harvested, the pot becomes available for the next crop. This is a true turnover container. Unlike baby kale or Mizuna, the radish pot does not usually remain productive after the roots are pulled. That makes the timing of the next sowing important. If you enjoy radishes regularly, another small batch should already be developing before the current one is removed. Baby beets bring more flexibility. The leaves can be used when young, and the roots can be harvested at a smaller size that suits container growing. But using the leaves heavily may affect how the plant develops below. So decide what you value most from that pot. If your goal is baby beet roots, avoid treating the container like a tray of microgreens. Give the plants enough space and time to build below the surface. If your goal is tender leaves, the root size may be less important. The harvest goal changes the rotation. Baby beets may also need a wider interval than the fastest salad greens. A pot can remain in the developing stage, while one or more lettuce containers move through the system. That is normal. The 4-stage model is not 4 exact weeks. It is 4 rolls that may last different lengths of time. Turnips add another choice, because both leaves and roots can be useful. In a small container, aiming for young roots may be more practical than waiting for maximum size. But do not assume turnips should be spaced exactly like radishes just because both are root crops. Their growth habit and the variety selected can change the amount of room they need. When harvesting roots, pull carefully and observe what remains in the pot. Fine roots, compressed areas, and lowered soil level can all affect the next sowing. Do not immediately scatter new seed onto a tired surface just because the container is empty. The empty pot is not the end of the system. It is the maintenance point. Remove old root material that could interfere with the next crop. Check whether the mix still feels loose. Confirm that drainage openings are clear. Add fresh container mix or mature compost in a reasonable amount if the level or structure needs improvement. The goal is not to replace every handful of soil after every harvest. That can be unnecessary. The goal is to restore the conditions the next roots need. A healthy rotation depends as much on what happens between crops as on what happens during growth. Root crops also create a powerful visual reminder. Above the surface, a pot may look ready. Below the surface, the harvest may be smaller, larger, or less uniform than expected. Use that information to adjust the next sowing. If roots are crowded, thin earlier. If the pot stayed wet too long, improve the mix or watering rhythm. If the harvest was more than you used, plant fewer. The next crop shows the opposite pattern. Green onions can remain useful without requiring the whole container to be cleared at once. Green onions are valuable in a rolling garden because many meals need only a small amount. A few chopped leaves finish eggs, soup, noodles, salads, rice, or a stir-fry. That means one established pot may serve the kitchen for longer than expected. You can harvest selected leaves, take individual plants, or clear a larger section when needed. Each choice changes the speed of replacement. If you remove only what dinner requires, the pot may remain productive while several faster crops enter and leave the rotation. Do not start another green onion pot simply because 7 days have passed. Look at how many plants remain, how quickly new growth appears, and how often the kitchen uses them. A long-lasting pot can act as another anchor in the garden. Green onions also show why a continuous harvest does not require every container to be full at all times. A partly harvested pot can still be useful if the remaining plants are healthy and spaced well. But if only a few weak plants remain and the container is taking valuable space, it may be better to finish the harvest and reset. Cilantro is also used in small amounts, but it responds differently. Many households want fresh cilantro for tacos, salsa, soups, curries, rice dishes, or garnishes, yet the amount used in one meal may be limited. That makes small, repeated sowings attractive. The challenge is that cilantro can change quickly when conditions become warm or stressful. A pot that seemed focused on leaf growth may begin stretching upward. Once the plant shifts toward flowering, the tender leaf harvest changes. This is where a rigid weekly schedule can become wasteful. If every new cilantro pot is entering the same warm conditions, planting more frequently may only create several pots that finish quickly. The better choice may be to sow smaller batches, use a more favorable planting window, provide appropriate conditions, or pause. Cilantro also benefits from honest kitchen feedback. If one pot produces more than you use, reduce the next sowing. If you consistently run out while the next container is still small, begin the next batch earlier during suitable weather. This simple record can help. Note when the pot first supplied a useful harvest, when the kitchen finished most of it, and what the weather was doing. You do not need a complicated spreadsheet. A few words on a label or garden notebook can reveal a pattern after several cycles. Herbs may occupy less space than larger vegetables, but their schedules can be more sensitive. They are often harvested a little at a time, and the plants may stay in the garden for very different lengths. The final 2 crops make that difference impossible to ignore. Parsley may remain slow and steady while dill changes rapidly. They can be the same age on the label and still tell completely different stories. Parsley is not a crop to judge by the speed of lettuce. Its early growth may feel slow, especially when placed beside fast greens planted on the same day. That does not mean the pot has failed. It means parsley belongs to a different rhythm. Because parsley can remain productive once established, it often works better as a long-term container than as a pot restarted every week. Allow the plant to build strength. When it is ready, harvest outer stems and leave healthy central growth. One established parsley pot may supply small amounts for many meals. If that amount matches your household, there is no reason to keep starting new pots. The correct succession interval may be much longer than the label on this video suggests. This is a useful reminder that a rotation can contain both moving pots and stable pots. Lettuce, radishes, or small mustard green batches may cycle through. Parsley, baby kale, green onions, or Mizuna may remain longer. The system becomes a mixture of turnover crops and anchor crops. Dill creates a different decision. If you mainly want tender leaves, small sowings can give you manageable harvests. If you want flowers or seeds, the plant must remain longer and the purpose of the container changes. Do not confuse those two goals. A dill pot grown for leaf harvest belongs to one schedule. A dill pot allowed to mature belongs to another. If the plant begins stretching upward and your goal was tender leaves, the useful harvest window may be ending. If your goal includes flowers or seed, that same change may be exactly what you want. This principle applies across the garden. A plant is not early or late without reference to the harvest you want. Baby kale harvested for leaves has a different finish line from kale grown larger. Bok choy harvested leaf by leaf has a different finish line from a whole head. Beets grown for greens have a different finish line from beets grown for roots. By now, All 15 crops can be placed somewhere in the system. Leaf lettuce, spinach, arugula, mustard greens, and radishes often fit the fast aside during suitable conditions. Baby kale, bok choy, tatsoi, Mizuna, baby beets, turnips, and green onions may spend longer in one or more stages. Cilantro, parsley, and dill require schedules that respond strongly to harvest goals and season. But the first real harvest exposes a hidden problem. The calendar may say it is time to plant another pot while the garden says something else. Imagine the newest lettuce container is already becoming full, but the previous lettuce pot still has many usable leaves. The radish container is empty. The parsley is still developing. The cilantro is beginning to stretch. If you plant one more identical pot, simply because it is Saturday, the system begins creating the same excess it was designed to prevent. This is the turning point. One pot every week is a useful starting rhythm. It becomes wasteful when every crop is forced to stay in that rhythm. The solution is not to abandon succession planting. The solution is to divide the garden into different speeds and let each harvest reset the schedule. Begin by placing crops into practical groups. The first group contains fast turnover crops. These are the containers that may move through sowing, growth, harvest, and reset relatively quickly when conditions are favorable. Leaf lettuce, spinach, arugula, mustard greens, and radishes often belong near this side of the system. The second group contains medium or flexible crops. Baby kale, bok choy, tatsoi, Mizuna, baby beets, turnips, and green onions may remain productive longer, may be harvested in stages, or may simply need more time to reach the goal you selected. The third group contains herbs and anchor crops, whose timing can be very different. Cilantro may require repeated small sowings during favorable weather. Parsley may stay for a long time. Dill may follow one schedule for leaves and another for flowers or seed. These groups are not permanent scientific categories, they are management categories. Their purpose is to help you stop treating every pot as though it has the same clock. Now, let the harvest set the next planting date. Before sowing, look at the current crop. How much is still there? Is the next pot close to harvest? Did the last batch disappear quickly, or did it remain unused? If the current pot is still full when the next pot is almost ready, choose one of 3 corrections. Wait longer before sowing again. Use a smaller container, or sow fewer plants in the same container. Waiting is often the simplest correction. Skipping 1 week is not breaking the system. It is the system responding correctly. A smaller container can be useful for strong-flavored crops or herbs used in limited amounts. A modest arugula or cilantro pot may fit the kitchen better than a large tub. Reducing the sowing quantity can also help. A container does not have to be filled edge to edge. Empty soil between properly spaced plants is not wasted space. It is room for healthy growth. If the opposite problem occurs and the harvest disappears before the next pot is ready, make a different correction. Start the next batch earlier. Add a second pot to that crop's rotation. Harvest in a way that extends the current container, or choose a crop that fills the gap. For example, a stable baby kale or green onion pot can support the kitchen while lettuce is between sowings. Mizuna may add leaves while spinach is paused. A few reliable anchor pots make the whole rotation more resilient. Track only what helps. You do not need to record every leaf. Write the crop, planting date, first useful harvest, and whether the batch was too much, too little, or about right. After several cycles, these simple notes become a personal planting calendar. A one-person household may discover that 1 lettuce pot every 2 or 3 weeks is enough when leaves are harvested gradually. A larger household may need 2 pots entering the sequence closer together. Neither schedule is universally correct. This is why copying someone else's exact calendar can be disappointing. Their climate, pot size, variety, sunlight, cooking habits, and family size may be different. Use examples as a starting point. Then build the schedule around your own harvest. 3 signals should guide every new sowing. First, the amount remaining in the harvest pot. Second, the stage of the next container. Third, the weather ahead. Household demand controls one side of the rotation. The season controls the other. A simple weekly check keeps the rotation from becoming complicated. Choose one regular day to inspect the containers, but do not assume that day must always become planting day. Begin at the harvest end of the line. Look for leaves or roots that should be used now. Harvest what the kitchen can realistically use, not everything that happens to be mature. Remove damaged leaves so they do not hide new growth. Then look at the next pot. Is it close enough to replace the current crop, or is there a gap forming? Move to the developing stage and check spacing. Seedlings that were small last week may now be touching. Thin where necessary, before crowding becomes difficult to correct. Check the surface of the mix, but also feel below it. A dry crust can hide moisture underneath, while a damp-looking surface can hide a root zone that is drying quickly. Finally, inspect the newest sowing. Look for germination, signs of washing, or areas where too many seedlings emerge together. Make small corrections early. A few minutes of thinning or gentle watering now can prevent a weak, crowded pot later. At the end of the check, make one decision: plant, wait, reduce, or replace. Plant when the current supply and the next stage show a future gap. Wait when enough food is already moving through the system. Reduce when the last batch created more than you used. Replace when a crop no longer matches the season or the meals you are making. This routine turns succession planting into a habit instead of a complicated project. You are not creating a new garden every week. You are making one useful adjustment to a garden that is already moving. It also prevents forgotten containers. A pot pushed into a corner can dry out, become overcrowded, or pass its best harvest stage without being noticed. Reading the line from oldest to youngest gives every container a moment of attention. If your pots cannot sit in a straight row, use numbered labels or a simple note on your phone. The physical arrangement is helpful, but the sequence matters more than the shape. A balcony shelf, patio corner, deck railing, or sunny doorstep can all hold a rotation when each pot has a clear identity. The weekly check is also the best moment to clean tools, remove fallen leaves, and confirm that drainage sources are not holding unwanted standing water. Small maintenance tasks are easier when they are connected to one regular observation day. Most importantly, the routine protects you from automatic planting. Buying seed and filling a pot can feel productive, but sometimes the most productive choice is to leave the pot empty for another week. A thoughtful pause is part of succession planting, not a failure to keep up. Most of the crops in this system are especially valuable during conditions that support cool season growth. That does not mean they all need identical temperatures, and it does not mean they behave the same in every region. It means the calendar must remain flexible. As the season warms, watch the plants, rather than waiting for a specific date. A lettuce center may begin rising. Spinach may move through its harvest stage faster. Cilantro, or dill, may stretch upward. The pot may dry more quickly because the plant is larger and the air is warmer. These are signals, not reasons to panic. The rotation is doing its job by showing you that the conditions have changed. The first adjustment may be timing. Start a smaller batch, increase the interval, or pause a crop that is repeatedly losing quality before the kitchen can use it. The second adjustment may be placement. Where appropriate, morning sun and some relief from intense late-day exposure can help certain leafy crops during a warming period. But reduced afternoon stress does not replace the light plants need. Observe the actual growth. The third adjustment is watering. Containers can dry quickly, but extra water is not a universal solution to heat. A waterlogged root zone creates its own problems. Check moisture in the mix rather than watering, only because the air feels hot. The fourth adjustment is crop choice. If spinach is struggling, another green may be more suitable for the current conditions. If cilantro is finishing too quickly, allow the rotation to pause instead of wasting repeated sowings. When more favorable weather returns, restart. Across the United States, the right dates vary widely. A schedule that works in a mild coastal area may fail in a hot inland climate. A fall rotation may begin at a very different time in the north than in the south. The principle remains stable even when the dates change. Stagger small batches, observe their response, and begin the next pot before the useful harvest disappears. Seasonal pauses do not destroy continuity, they protect it. A continuous garden is not one that forces the same crop to grow every day of the year. It is one that keeps making sensible transitions. Sometimes the best planting decision is to wait. The label may say that another week has arrived, but the garden may be telling you that this crop should rest. When conditions improve, the system restarts easily because the containers, labels, and habits are already in place. You are not rebuilding from nothing. You are changing the plants that move through the structure. Eventually, every turnover crop leaves an empty pot. What happens next determines whether the following harvest begins with healthy conditions or inherited problems. An empty container is not automatically ready for seed. Begin by removing the finished plant and as much old root material as reasonably possible. Fine roots can decompose, but thick root crowns, tangled masses, or diseased material should not be left to interfere with the next crop. If the previous plant showed signs of disease, do not assume the potting mix can be reused without thought. The correct response depends on the problem. At minimum, separate questionable material from healthy compost and clean the container before it returns to production. For a normal healthy harvest, inspect the mix. Does it still feel loose, or has it compacted into a dense layer? Has the level dropped? Does water move through the pot, or sit on the surface? Are the drainage openings clear? Loosen the upper portion carefully. Add fresh container mix or mature compost if the structure or level needs improvement. Avoid turning every reset into a heavy feeding. More fertilizer is not automatically better, especially for small seedlings. The goal is a balanced growing medium, not the strongest possible mixture. If the pot has been used through many cycles and the mix no longer drains or supports healthy roots, a more complete refresh may be necessary. The container itself is reusable, but the medium must still perform. Once the pot is ready, remove the old label, write the new crop and planting date. Sow the next batch at the depth and spacing appropriate for that seed. Water gently so the surface is moist without being washed into a crust. Now return the pot to stage 1. The other containers move forward. The developing crop becomes the next harvest candidate. The young crop enters stronger growth. The newest seedlings take the young position. The reset container becomes the beginning. Harvest 1, move 3, plant the next. That simple sequence is the visible heartbeat of the system. It turns an empty pot from a sign of loss into a sign of continuation. Notice that the final goal is not to keep every square inch green every moment. Sometimes a newly sown pot looks almost empty. Sometimes a container is paused because the season is wrong. Sometimes an anchor crop stays in place while 3 faster pots cycle around it. Productivity is not measured only by how full the garden looks. It is measured by how well the garden supplies useful food without creating constant waste or pressure. Now, the complete rotation can be seen in one frame. A mature pot supplies today's meal. Behind it, another is nearly ready. A younger container is building. The final pot has just been replanted. The harvest did not end when the first container became empty. That empty container has already become the beginning of the next harvest. From these 15 crops, your best starting rotation may contain only a few. Choose the vegetables and herbs that already appear in your meals. If you make salads often, begin with leaf lettuce, arugula, Mizuna, or baby kale. If you cook soups and stir-fries, bok choy, tatsoi, mustard greens, or green onions may be more valuable. If you enjoy quick roots, try radishes, baby beets, or young turnips. If fresh flavor matters most, use cilantro, parsley, or dill in small, realistic batches. Start with 1 pot, label it. A little later, start the next. Watch how long the first useful harvest lasts. Notice whether the second pot arrives too early or too late. Then adjust. Do not plant all 15 crops simply because they are on this list. A smaller garden that matches your kitchen will outperform a larger garden filled with unused produce. Remember the 3 rules that keep the rotation working. Do not plant everything at once unless you truly want one concentrated harvest. Do not manage every crop with one identical calendar. And do not ignore the empty pot, because that is where the next cycle begins. The most successful schedule will not be the neatest one on paper. It will be the schedule that changes when the plants, weather, and household change. Some weeks, the right action is to sow. Some weeks, it is to harvest. Some weeks, it is to thin, refresh, or wait. All of those actions belong to the same system. A continuous harvest is not created by one enormous planting day. It is created by small planting decisions repeated at the right time. Today, one pot is ready. Behind it, the next harvest is already forming. Behind that, another crop is building strength. And at the end of the line, a few seeds are beginning the whole process again. Start with the crops your household actually eats. Plant them in small batches. Give every pot a label. Let each harvest teach you when to begin the next one. One pot, one useful step, one harvest leading into another.